Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. So with that in mind, let's jump right in to this week's episode of Becoming Something.
What's up, podcast world? It's your boy JP in the podcast studio with Kathy. I am pregnant Davidson.
I'm very pregnant.
Well, I didn't say very.
That's what y'all are all thinking.
Since
it
there's
really
a
popped
child
out over Christmas. That's
growing
all I gotta
inside
say.
of you. The baby came out over
No,
Christmas?
like my belly.
Oh, okay. All right.
Out.
Okay. And Nathan Hilgenkamp, the one and only German.
100% German.
For
Is that
sure.
true?
Yeah.
For sure.
As far as I know, both my mom's side and my dad's side, Schumacher and Hilgenkamp,
Oh,
super
You're
duper
so
German.
German.
Yeah.
Schumacher.
You kind of stopped up.
What?
I have never seen a drink before with 32% of your daily fiber in it.
Oh, yeah.
What? Since when do drinks have fiber? That's in like
Usually when somebody
granola
says,
bars.
"Are you stopped up?"
I
they're talking
thought
about
you
your
were like,
nose.
Oh, is he sick?
No,
He
you're talking
doesn't
about
sound sick.
gastrointestinal.
Yeah, I'm like, man.
Do we have to start with that on the podcast?
I
don't think so.
If it's a prayer
Well,
request,
I
I
just-
want the people to be praying for
I
you.
totally listen. This is of the Lord, because, oh gosh,
No.
I'm really going out there.
Oh no.
So,
please.
I completely fell susceptible to one of these like Instagram ads,
Yeah.
and I bought some colon broom. Oh man, it's not even. Wait, are you okay? What is wrong?
Are you for real?
It's a colon broom.
Not what it
Do they
sounds
just
like.
call it that?
Not what it sounds like.
So,
yeah.
like a
so is
pill?
it like
It's
a
something you
really
drink.
big?
No, stop with your hands.
That's where.
You can't do that. What are you talking about? This is on YouTube, man.
So is it like collapsible, and then once it
Stop.
gets inside, it
Stop.
just sleeps you?
And
We
so
did not
it's
have to
a
name it
drink.
that.
It's a drink, but it's just fiber. I don't know if it's just fiber, but I think it is. And this is not an ad, and we are not sponsored, although we should be. And it came in the mail, and so Monica takes a picture of it, and she's like, "What is this?" with the like emoji, like the
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, so when you said that, I was like, "What do you know?"
Is it working?
I don't know. It's like I don't know. Hey, I'm 40, man.
Oh, that's so sad.
Prebiotics. This is Olipop. Yeah. Today's Becoming Something, sponsored by Olipop.
I miss the good old days when we were sponsored by Nerds Gummy Clusters.
Can't do
and
it,
then
man.
all of a sudden, you had to give them up for the whole year.
Look at Kathy with the
Which
transition.
She's
we can't
crushing
even
it.
have it. Can I have a high five? That was good.
on.
So what do you mean he can't have Nerds Gummy
He told us
Clusters?
today that he gave up desserts and sweets, and that means candy, which means he can't have Nerds Gummy Clusters all year, which means we don't get the free ones at the podcast studio from.
Hey,
his
can I
dad.
say
Actually,
something?
it means you get them all.
I think that's stupid.
You think what's stupid?
Giving something up for a year. A year is such a long time.
It does seem kind of like weird. Like, why did you choose desserts?
Do y'all not
sweets?
y'all give stuff up? What do y'all, I don't know what
The
you're doing
only-
right now.
I do
but-
because I would like my job, and I want to keep my
I've never
job.
threatened you with your job.
I think
So I
it
gave
is a
up
good
buying. I
practice.
gave up buying last year, so I couldn't buy anything for myself last year. So I could buy, like, people were like, "Hey, you bought food." I could buy food and whatnot. I
necessities.
couldn't buy like clothes and whatnot. Shopping. This year I'm giving up desserts and sweets, candy, all those kinds of things, and so as a practice, generally our staff
Yeah.
we do that. We give something up for the year. It's a form of fasting. You don't give up like Brussels sprouts or salads. You give up something that you want, and that's hard to go without. And then when you want it, you reflect on God.
I'm
What's so
just
funny?
thinking what Kathy said at
What did I say?
our meeting, our staff
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, what was that about? Guilty conscience.
I know it was like now I'm concerned.
Well, because we give that advice to people if they struggle, like don't bring your phone in the bedroom.
Yeah, so explain what you're doing.
So I'm giving up having my phone in my bedroom, specifically like by my bed at night, because I'll just scroll before bed and you waste 20 minutes and you should have just gone to sleep. But as I was explaining it for some reason, I was like, but I don't look at anything bad, I promise. Like, I don't know why I said that. But I do think we give that advice to people if they're struggling with pornography. Hey, just don't even bring it into the room. Like, don't give, the devil a foothold. But I just
And you
was
gave up
clarifying.
nothing?
Yeah, you didn't even respond.
I'm
never
not
give something
like
up.
owned by anything.
Baloney! I think I could guess what you gave up.
Oh wow.
I mean, you would if you love Jesus.
I'm giving
give up
I'm giving
video
up Baylor
games?
Sports until
I'm
they're
trying to
good.
raise my money.
I sold my Xbox.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Did you give that up?
No, so I'm giving up alcohol.
You don't even really drink.
You had a drink
I
at
know.
my house last night.
I know last night.
Why do you hang out without me all the time?
We were planning the podcast here.
Gosh. You live in the same neighborhood.
No, we don't. No, we do not.
Hey, if you can
Y'all are
walk
going
to
to
someone's
lunch
house,
today.
if you can walk to someone's house,
Hang out
you're in
without
the
me on
same.
Mondays. I would have had a drink of water with y'all.
If you can walk to someone's house, you're in the same neighborhood.
You were literally taking shots of tequila at my house.
No,
I'm
That's
joking.
not
That's
true.
a joke. It's a joke. That's not true. Not true.
I feel like you're giving up something that you don't even really care about. The point is, like, give up something that kind of owns you.
Okay,
so
sorry,
you feel
Mom.
it. Okay.
Yeah, you're not really a drinker.
So
But I could see if you were like at this place where you're like, hey, I don't want to become one, and I'm beginning to feel like the pressure, like just being around people who are drinking, and so then I could say, hey, I gave this up for the year. Is it that?
like that I'm afraid of becoming an alcoholic.
No, but just like, hey, I don't want to
So-
I don't want to become a drinker, if you will. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not one, and now I'm feeling pressure to drink when I'm around people socially, and it's easier to say, hey, I gave this up for the year.
Sure. So here's where it came from. I was talking to someone who I really respect, and they were like, "Hey, I want to give you some advice," and I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, well, I don't think as a pastor you should drink, like even specifically like where you live, like in your city where you live. And I was like, man, I just fought back against it. I was like, that is a dumb idea. That is like a legalistic idea. That's like an old Baptist idea.
Yeah.
And I have the freedom to drink. I don't get drunk. Like it doesn't control me. I just fought back against it a lot, and I left, and I was like, man, I think there's something there that I just don't want to submit to. And I like someone who I respect, who loves Jesus, and I'm just like, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. So just trying to prove to myself that I can do it for a year, that like I just want to submit to that leadership. So
that's awesome.
Wow.
Anyway,
I find it like hard, challenging. I know we're not talking about alcohol, but two thoughts. One, I feel like here the perception management thing is so big that can play into that, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to shepherd that. Right. And then the other thing I feel often is like walking into the gathering or the function, and people like feel like they have to like set their drink down and like, hey, how are you?
Right.
Oh no, that's just doctor. And I'm like, hey man, I'm a normal person. I believe Jesus' first miracle was he turned water into wine at a wedding. Mm-hmm. I believe it's fine to have a glass of wine with a meal, is if there's not someone else there that struggles with either legalism or licentiousness, in their liberties of alcohol. I think you have the freedom to do that to the glory of God, but we shouldn't get drunk. We've done podcasts on alcohol before, right? We have?
Yeah.
We have. It's been a while, but we have.
Go back and listen to it. If you're a new listener, go back and listen to the podcast on alcohol. But today we're really talking about it's the beginning of the new year. Yep. Hey, how you doing with your resolutions? Like some of you joined gyms, you went on diets, you're doing keto right now, you haven't eaten carbs in a couple of weeks. And
how long do people normally make it with resolutions?
Like statistically, it's like right now.
3 weeks, right?
Yeah,
like when
it's
this
like
releases?
it's like this is when you stop. And so so many of our resolutions are self-focused, self-centered. It can kind of grow narcissism amongst the Christian community. And so there are some general practices that we put into place that might be helpful to you. And I think this is a really good time. I'm going to give you 2 words. looking back and looking forwards, or two terms, I should say, looking back and looking forward. So it's a great time to look back and just to create space to give thanks to God for what he did in 2022. And I know we're well into January now, but I kind of take all of January to think through these things.
I liked when you said that earlier.
Like you don't feel like New Year's Day, like that's your 24-hour period to really do this. I take all of January, I give each of my children a word, and kind of speak that over them. And hey, this is what I see in you, or what I want to see in you in this year. Have a word for myself, and then the practice of giving something up. But before we get into that, I think just to talk about the looking back and to create space to give God praise and gratitude, express gratitude for what he's done. All throughout Scripture, they would do things like in Deuteronomy 6, you see that they would bind the word of the Lord to their hand and to their forehead. Like the Israelites, God's people would create space to remember who God is and what he's done. And in fact, I listened to a sermon yesterday that was talking about, you'd always see Moses with his staff, Jacob with his staff. It says Jacob leaned on his staff. And I always thought, hey,
this is the same thing. It's like, I feel like you don't do anything. You can't do anything. You're just always leaning on us to do everything for you.
Oh my goodness.
Good
it's
one.
like, hey, make me a sandwich. Okay.
You're
Dad
so
jokes.
funny.
When have you ever made me a sandwich? It'd be nice today. Maybe once.
I've just done so much more for you than you've done for me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, thank you.
yeah.
I guess it's just a great
You were
time to
about to
express
say something
gratitude.
really, really
Yeah.
profound.
Guys, I'm so sorry for the interruption to the profound truth that I was about to share from God's word, because Nate had something really important to say.
Yeah, thank you for adding that to the podcast.
Hashtag dad jokes. So it's just like they were talking about in this message, there's commentary that the staff is where they would write the things that God has done. And so when they lean on the staff, they would lean on remembering what God has done. When Jacob leaned on his staff that he had because God wrestled him and the angel of the Lord knocked his hip out of socket in Genesis 32, that's on his staff, that he's reminding himself that he's wrestled with the Lord and lived, and Moses, when he throws his staff down and it turns into a snake and it eats the other snakes that are there, that before he does, he has to be reminded of who God is and what he's done, that he's been faithful throughout the ages, And so for us, he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he's done these things for us, and we shouldn't just turn the page without first looking back to be reminded of the faithfulness of God. And so one thing that I would just encourage listeners to do is to get an empty page in the journal and just write down some of those things, those acts of faithfulness that God did last year, to be reminded to look back.
Yeah.
It's important, too, what you see in Deuteronomy 8. It's like the same sermon you were referencing in Deuteronomy 6. God is saying that the reason we want to look back, he says this in verse 17, beware, or lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. Like, an important part of looking back is to remember that all of the good that you've been given, all of the blessings in your life were not because of you, but because of God. And then I think of the story in Joshua 4, when Joshua is leading the Israelites into the promised land, and they come against another body of water, the Jordan River. And once again, the Ark of the Covenant goes in before them. The waters part. The Israelites are able to walk through on dry ground, very similar to the Red Sea story. And then he says, hey, go back and get 12 stones from the middle of the river and then build an altar, so that when people ask you, your children and your children's children ask you, hey, what is that altar there for? You're able to say, hey, the Lord did this. He delivered us. So it's important for me, because I'm so prideful, like, to look back at this past.
Amen.
About time I admitted it, right?
Amen.
It's important to look back so that we remember that it's God that's doing all of these things in our lives.
You read it again.
Ourselves.
What does it say?
Okay, it says in Deuteronomy 8, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. And
What's the irony is, that he did not enter the promised land because when he was getting water from a rock, it was like, hey, look at me, look what I'm doing. And he didn't obey the Lord and give God all the glory. And God's like, hey, you're never going to go in there. And I think there's such a temptation for us to do that, to not depend on him.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a place recently where I was just like amongst a group of people getting to speak at a conference, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, chump from Cuero, Texas. I get to serve in a church in the country, like outside of Waco, really in a town of like 2,700 people. And it's like, man, God, you are so faithful. Like, you constantly do things that we are undeserving of. And so,
And the opposite of remembering is forgetting, which he goes on to say, and if you forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. So that's the other part of the warning there, is like when we don't remember God, we end up forgetting him.
Yeah.
And when we forget God, we disobey him. We choose ourselves instead of him. And that leads to death.
which happened with Solomon, which is so ironic because
Yes.
he has this like make a wish with God, King Solomon, and God says, hey, I want wisdom to lead your people, and God gives him wisdom, and he becomes the wealthiest man who's ever lived. I mean, he amasses great wealth and fortune for himself, builds an entire kingdom, but then he has all of these wives, and some of them worship other gods, and he begins to build temples and altars to other gods, and then his heart is led astray and he dies.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something hilarious?
You did have I'm about to make a joke.
I'm
face.
sorry. I was just thinking about the
Colon
the
broom.
colon broom.
Are you kidding
I'm
me?
sorry.
I don't know that he's
We're
thought
having this
anything
great
else.
conversation,
I just saw that
remembering
it's-
God.
I'm looking at the dude.
You
I'm
need
sorry.
to remember to pay attention to what's being
I
said
wasn't
in this
going to
podcast.
say it.
Gosh.
So
Well, you see it not just with Solomon. Almost every Bible character other than Jesus has a moment where they forget God. David, a man after God's own heart. What does he do? He really messes up. Like, we all have moments in our lives where we forget God.
Yeah.
And that's why we're commanded so often to remember.
So what did y'all see in your life last year? Like, what do you want to remember? What do you want to change? Like, we're also having a word for the year. So like, it would be helpful if you guys could share your word for the year, and like, what is that based out of?
Yeah. And so that's the looking back. And so now's the looking forward. And I just think about, adding and removing, like we do the exercise on staff of just like keep, stop, start. So what do I want to keep doing that I'm currently doing? What do I want to stop doing that I'm currently doing? And then what do I want to start doing that I'm not doing? And so just, that's a simple framework for how to think through things. And then we just add a word. Like I'm a simple person. So I'm not like a 12 pages of a plan for 2023. It's just like, hey, what is a word? And it can be an area, like I want this to be an area of growth. I want this to mark my life. I want it to be something that I focus on. And so that word kind of, in a similar way of the stones of remembrance, and Ebenezer is what that's called too. So I said, and we raise our Ebenezer. The wrapping tefillin, where they would wrap the word of God around them, the phylacteries, if you will, where they're just constantly trying to create this thing that they trip over to reflect on the goodness of God, who he is and his character. We just come up with a word. And so that's a simple way that we do it. And so I told the staff why he's trying to get me to say it, because I told the staff, I said, hey, I'm not going to tell you my word, but if you get one guess, and if you guess it, I'll pay you $200. Because I want you to see it on me,
I have two.
Yeah.
I have two guesses.
Yeah.
Um,
Can it be close?
It's not close. Was that your guess? You're done. No. You're done. So everybody gets one guess. So
I'm
Nate's
not
used
saying
his
mine.
guess.
I'm still thinking. But
Oh, really?
about his, I
Oh.
shared mine. Thank you for paying attention.
Oh, I know what it is.
Well, what I was going to say is, like, this has brought a lot of, like, clarity and help for me. I am, like, the queen of 20 resolutions a year. I think we've talked about that on the podcast before, where it's like, I have a million dreams and a million things I want to do. And guess what? By week 3 in January, I've failed at all of them, and that makes you feel horrible. So I love the idea of just simply, hey, what's something you can give up as a way of fasting? And then, hey, what's one word that you want to pray over your year? What do you think God has for you this year? And I was looking back at my word for last year, and that's like a huge area of growth. I chose the word presence, like just trying to be aware
She's
of
like,
God's.
I want more presents. She's like, buy me
Don't
presents.
the other way.
and
I
God
would
gave
like
me
to get presents.
Actually, yeah, I got some good presents. But anyways, God, that's like the theme of my past year, was learning how to look for God, to listen for him, to just be aware and be in his presence more often. And so that was really cool. And it was really encouraging. And so I feel even more excited for this next year. My word is prayer. And yeah, I feel like God gave that to me, and he wants to show me something there, and I'm excited for what that is. So highly encourage everyone to try it.
So, you give. So what's your word?
Swag. I just thought.
No, you don't have to be that way. What's your word?
Swag.
Do you remember yours from last year?
Uh huh.
What was it?
It was servant.
Man, I don't think I saw that on you at all. Where'd you write that? How did you?
Maybe repeat that.
Let's just run that back, man.
It kind
2023.
of be a hope. It doesn't have to actually happen.
2023 is your year, man.
The Lord correctly.
Servant.
I can see it actually. One day he bought our team coffee, like on his own card.
And then I leave the room and Kathy's like, he put that on like the church card. Right?
What's
So then
wrong?
everyone
You
was like,
proved me
Nate,
wrong.
that wasn't like that nice. I'm like, what in the
He really
world?
paid for it.
Like,
I was proud of you.
I'm
trying to encourage
just getting
you.
attacked.
I see you
I'm
growing
trying to
in that
serve my team.
Dang.
What's your word this year?
Example from
1 Timothy 4:12, baby.
Yeah. So set an example in speech, conduct, faith, love, and purity. So, man, that's what I like. A wrestle for me is like I want to have fun with my words and what's the balance between setting an example as a leader, as a pastor, versus just being relational and fun and.
Yeah.
So like with words, and then also I've been loved really well recently, and I don't think I set an example on loving people well. Like I don't move towards people well, so I want to be an example in loving people well.
That's good.
And and then faith. We were so I was talking to Louis Giglio. Anyway, he's just got a lot of faith. In our conversation, I was really impressed, and I was like, "Man, I don't think I set an example in faith either." So those are the three things, and the other two are great also.
Man, it's good.
Conduct and purity.
that.
So,
It's good,
yeah.
Nate. Come on,
Thanks.
man.
There
Way
we
to
go.
go.
Yeah.
So then you said your word was
Can't say. Can't say. It's not closed though.
Can I get?
You already guessed. You can help Kathy if you want, so that she can get it. But
Have you said the word today?
oh, I don't know, Nate. I don't know. I'm
what if
not
his
sure.
word of the year is Nate? So
Is
every
what?
time you think of Nate, you're
Just
praying
so
for
it'd be more
him.
like Nate, yeah.
Yeah,
Did you
he's
guys-
your example.
You guys remember my favorite Nate story, man?
Your password.
Yes. Dude, I get to Harris Creek, okay? I get to Harris Creek, and my password was Jonathan, okay? Which is not my password anymore, so it's not going to work. But he goes, he was like trying to get in. He's like, well, what's your password? And I typed J-O, and then I typed N-A-T-H-A-N, Nathan, right? And he goes, what? Your password is my name? I can't believe it. Your password is my name.
I
And
mean,
he
this
was
is like my
dead
hero. It's
serious.
like I've been listening to the porch for a long time, and then he takes me to go. He's speaking at something, and I'm like, I'm just living the dream. And then I find out his password's my name. I'm like, oh my gosh!
Why would my
Lord, take me now.
password? Why would my password be your
And
name?
then you're like, no,
Creeped out.
it's Joe Nathan,
Yeah.
Jonathan. I was
My
like,
name was your
oh my gosh!
Dude.
Hey.
I've never turned more red.
And then
so fast.
my second favorite Nate moment was Sunday when I told you Louis asked about you.
That's right. Yeah.
And you
He
lost
like
it.
jumps up and runs out of the room, and he's like, "Yes." Oh man.
Oh
yeah.
man, but Tebow did, right?
No, he didn't for some reason. Man, he didn't. It's good. It's good. So looking back and looking forward, just like that you haven't wasted the year yet. It's still January. If you've whiffed on your New Year's resolutions, you might have too many and they might be too high of a bar, but just take this simple practice. Hey, today, you can do this today. Today, I want to look back. I want to give God thanks for the things that he did, the acts of faithfulness in 2022. Then I want to look forward, and I just want to say, okay, what do I want to be marked by in 2023? What's a word that I want to grab onto and come up with your word? And if you have a word, like if you're listening to this right now and you have a word, create a group text and just say, hey, I want you guys to know my word is. And so they can offer you some accountability, or you can even say, hey, as you pray for me this year, would you pray this for me? Would you pray this word for me? And they will. If you do that, you get to the end of the year, you are going to see and celebrate that change in your life. Like God is faithful.
Yeah.
As his people pray that for you, as you think about that, like the Spirit of God is gonna create that in your life. And if you're struggling to come up with the word, start with the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Is there one of those that you say, all right, I need more of that in my life? I need to increase that virtue, that fruit in my life.
Sorry, I was just talking to Kathy.
Don't distract me. Because I think another important element of choosing your word is like invite God into the process too. Like just spend time in prayer with him, spend time in scripture, asking him, hey, what do I want to be marked by this year, but what do you want me to be marked by? Yeah. And I feel like that makes a difference.
And let this like drive, if you're in a small group, if you're listening, you're in a small group, let this conversation drive conversations between you guys, so you can forward it or throw it in that group text and say, hey, let's listen to this together and create this practice together, add some accountability to it. Hey, let's all look back. Next time we gather, let's share what we saw in the faithfulness of God last year. And then here's my word next year. And if you want to go kind of 2.0, if you want extra credit, the keep, stop, start. Hey, what do I want to keep doing? What do I want to stop doing? What do I want to start doing? That can be professionally, spiritually, personally, relationally. Those are all helpful things.
How do you keep coming back to that during the year? Like, how do you make sure in April you still know what your word is?
Yeah, I think just writing it down. And, something I use Outlook calendar every now and then. I'll throw a reminder in my calendar, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, just to, hey, a reminder, here's the thing you want to check up on. You can put that in the calendar and it will live there. And you can even say, hey, I want to repeat every 3 months. And it will do that. Google Calendar, whatever calendar you use, works in a similar ways. But everybody has there's so many tools out there. I'm a guy that I just use the tools I have to use. Yeah. And I don't use a lot of other tools. And so I just try to use the tools that I have to use in a smart way.
Yeah.
Another thing is I ask people to ask me. So my guys that I'm in community with, hey, will you guys ask me about this? Will you make sure that this is growing in my life? And so whether that's something I want to stay away from or something I want to move towards.
Yeah.
I literally wrote my word last year on a note card and had it by my bathroom sink where I would get ready every morning. So that's so simple. Somewhere where you're going to see it and can remember it yourself too.
Yeah.
That's good.
Good.
I just, God he always has more for us. He always wants us to be growing closer to him, be conformed more and more into the image of his son. And so just don't settle for where you're at right now in your relationship with God. He wants more and he has more for you. So just jump in this year and see what that is.
Yeah. 2023.
Sure year.
Look back and look forward. I'm excited to see you guys next week.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Becoming Something, where we promise to keep the conversation honest and real for young adults in their 20s and 30s. Every moment we live is training for a future moment, and that's why we do this podcast, because we want you to be prepared for everything that life is going to throw at you. Our hope with this podcast is that it would help you become all that God desires you to be. To find out more, visit becomingsomething.com.